Have you ever noticed that the older we get, the quieter our hearts become? It is not just about age, it is about wisdom. After 65, something shifts. We begin to understand that not everything needs to be said. Some truths, even when spoken with love, can lead to worry, distance, or misunderstandings. There was a time when she believed sharing everything would bring her closer to the people she loved. Her thoughts, her health concerns, her finances, even her regrets. She offered it all, thinking it meant connection. But over time, she realized something powerful. True peace, the kind that lets you sleep at night and breathe deeply in the morning, often comes from knowing what to keep for yourself, not out of fear, not because you are hiding, but because you have finally learned what is worth protecting. In this video, we will talk about 5 things she chose to stop sharing with her family after turning 65, and how each decision helped her protect her peace, her independence, and her dignity. If you have ever felt emotionally drained after a conversation, or found yourself regretting how much you revealed, then this message is for you. You deserve to live the next chapter of your life with calm, clarity, and self-respect. And sometimes, the path to peace is not in saying more. It is in knowing when to say less. So, let's begin. Secret number 1, your full financial picture. The first thing she learned to keep to herself was her full financial situation. For decades, she had worked hard, saved carefully, and given generously. She had lived through lean years, supported her family, skipped indulgences, and quietly built a life of stability. So when she turned 70, she thought it would be smart and even responsible to share it all with her children. Not just the basics, but everything. Her savings, her pension, the house value, the will, and even who would get what when she was gone. She sat them down with the best of intentions, hoping for peace of mind and perhaps a little appreciation. At first, they listened with kind eyes. They nodded, offered polite support, and thanked her for being transparent. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. The questions began. Not harsh or unkind, but constant. Do you really need a new car right now? Are you sure that cruise is the best use of money? Should you be donating to charity when we don't know what healthcare might cost down the line? It wasn't that they didn't care. They did. But now her financial choices, once completely her own, were suddenly under quiet scrutiny. Every decision seemed open to input, sometimes even subtle disapproval. She didn't feel free. She felt observed. And that's when she realized a powerful truth. Sharing everything had changed the way her family saw her. Not as a strong, independent woman who had managed her life well, but as someone whose future now needed to be managed. Even worse, people from outside her immediate circle started acting differently too. A distant niece who never called suddenly wanted to visit. A grandson who rarely showed interest now asked, "So, what's going to happen with your house one day?" It became clear. Once the full financial curtain is pulled back, it rarely closes again. What she had meant as a gift of clarity became a source of pressure. The lesson? You can be prepared. You can have a legally sound will, a durable power of attorney, and clear wishes written down. But you do not have to invite others into your financial world before it is necessary. Privacy is not secrecy. It is protection. It is a way of preserving the life you've built and the freedom to enjoy it on your own terms. You are not being selfish by keeping your finances to yourself. You are being wise. You are honoring the work it took to get here, and you are choosing peace over permission. Because in this chapter of life, you deserve to live freely. Not as someone whose spending must be explained, but as someone who has earned the right to do exactly as she pleases. Secret number 2, small health concerns. The second thing she learned to keep to herself was the small, everyday health complaints. A little soreness after gardening, a dizzy spell while getting out of bed, a night of restless sleep. At one point, she would have shared these things freely over a phone call with her daughter, or mentioned them casually during lunch with her granddaughter, not to alarm anyone, just to feel heard, to feel understood. But over time, she started noticing a pattern. One comment about a sore shoulder turned into a home visit with a physical therapist brochure. A mention of feeling tired led to her son researching assisted living options online. Suddenly, everything was a red flag. What she meant as a passing remark was taken as a warning sign. Her family, bless their hearts, began seeing her not as the same vibrant, capable woman they'd always known, but as someone fragile, vulnerable, slowing down. She could see it in their eyes. One evening, after mentioning she had skipped her walk because of knee pain, her daughter called the next morning and gently asked if it might be time to consider some extra help around the house. That stung, because she knew her body. She knew the difference between discomfort and danger. She had lived in it for over 70 years. Yes, she had aches. Yes, she moved a little slower. But that did not mean she had lost her independence or her spirit. Here's what she realized. The more she talked about her minor health issues, the more her family saw her through a lens of worry. And the more they worried, the more they started to treat her like someone who needed managing, not respecting. And that's where the quiet shift began. She stopped mentioning every twinge. She began to keep the little things between her and her doctor, because sometimes sharing every small pain only magnified it, both in their eyes and in her own. When conversations with loved ones become centered around symptoms, appointments, or energy levels, life starts to feel smaller. The things that once defined her, her wit, her curiosity, her memories, her love of music and books, got pushed aside by talk of blood pressure and backaches. She didn't want that. She didn't want her grandchildren to remember her as always tired or always talking about pain. She wanted to be remembered as sharp, kind, and strong. This wasn't denial. It was a choice to keep her dignity intact, a choice to speak up only when something truly needed attention, not to broadcast every discomfort that came with aging. Because yes, aging brings changes, but not all of them are warnings. Some are just life being lived inside an older body, and she had every right to decide which details were worth sharing and which ones were hers alone. She also discovered something else, something more subtle. When she stopped talking constantly about how she felt physically, she started feeling more emotionally present. She noticed the flowers in bloom, the laughter in a neighbor's voice, the joy of cooking her own breakfast without interruption. Her health was no longer the center of every conversation, and she liked that. She still had regular checkups. She still listened to her body, but she no longer turned every ache into a family update. And in doing so, she reclaimed something precious, her narrative. Because no woman wants to be seen as declining when she still feels deeply alive. And so, she held on to that truth. You are more than your symptoms. You are more than your discomfort. You are still whole, still wise, still wonderfully here. Secret number 3, family conflicts. The third thing she learned to keep to herself was her opinion during family conflicts. In her younger years, she saw herself as the peacemaker, the one who kept everyone talking, kept things from falling apart. It came naturally. Mothers, after all, are used to fixing things. A scraped knee, a broken heart, a misunderstanding between siblings. For years, she believed it was her role to step in and smooth over whatever tension happened around her. But after 65, something changed. She began to see that not every battle needed her presence. Not every argument needed her wisdom. And some situations were not hers to fix, no matter how much she loved the people involved. It started with something small. One day, her two daughters had a disagreement about how to handle a holiday gathering. One wanted to host Thanksgiving in the city. The other insisted it stay at home, where the family had always gathered. Voices were raised. Feelings were hurt. She, meaning only to help, said, "I think your sister might just be trying to include everyone." That one sentence created a wall. Not because it was cruel, but because in that moment, one daughter felt judged and the other felt justified. She watched as the dynamic shifted, not between them, but between them and her. She was no longer neutral. She had become part of the issue. Over time, she began to notice this pattern again and again. When she tried to ease tension between her sons-in-law, when she offered suggestions about how the grandchildren were being disciplined, even when she brought up a family friend who always borrowed but never gave back. Every time her intentions were good, but the result was the same. Silence, distance, coldness that lingered long after the argument had passed. And so, she began to choose a different path. She started saying things like, "I trust you to work it out," or "I'm here if you need to talk, but I won't take sides." At first, it felt like she was doing nothing, like she was failing her role as a mother, as a matriarch. But then she noticed something surprising. The less she inserted herself, the more her relationships stabilized. Her children didn't feel judged. Her grandchildren didn't see her as a referee. And she, for the first time in years, felt peace instead of pressure. She realized that being quiet doesn't mean being uninvolved. It means being wise enough to protect your energy and emotionally strong enough to resist the urge to control. She learned that her presence alone, her calm, steady, listening presence, was more powerful than any advice she could give. Because when you speak during conflict, your words are filtered through someone else's emotion. They hear what they think you mean, not always what you intend. And sometimes, they hold on to it longer than the conflict itself. She didn't want that weight. She didn't want her last decade to be spent walking on emotional eggshells or being blamed for saying the wrong thing during the wrong moment. So she chose silence, not out of fear, but out of deep understanding. And when asked what she thought, she would smile softly and say, "I think you're all doing your best. I trust you to find your way." And she meant it. Because at this stage in life, she knew that love doesn't always look like involvement. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like letting go. And sometimes it looks like choosing peace over being right. Secret number 4, deep regrets. The fourth thing she chose to hold close was something far more personal than money or health. It was her regrets. Not the obvious kind. The little things like forgetting someone's birthday or burning the turkey at Christmas. These were not regrets that passed quickly. They were the quiet ones. The ones that sat at the edge of memory, softly reminding her of roads not taken, dreams quietly tucked away, and sacrifices that never got acknowledged. She had them, just like everyone else. She remembered the years she put her education on hold to raise her children, the job she turned down because her husband was building his career, the trip she never took to Europe when she was young and wild enough to explore freely. She sometimes wondered who she might have become if she had followed her own ambitions, instead of always holding space for others. In her own quiet moments, she would revisit these memories, not with bitterness, but with curiosity. What if? What could have been? And like many women her age, she sometimes felt the pull to share these reflections with her children or grandchildren. Maybe she wanted to be honest. Maybe she wanted to show them how life is full of complex choices. Or maybe she just needed to say it out loud. But she learned, often the hard way, that some regrets, even when shared gently, can land in the wrong place. One afternoon, she told her granddaughter, "Sometimes I wish I had traveled more before I got married." The comment was meant as a passing thought, not a declaration. But later that week, her daughter called, voice tight, and asked, "Do you regret the life you chose with us?" That question broke her heart, because the answer was no, not really. She loved her family. She cherished the home she built, the memories, the laughter, even the chaos. But that didn't mean she never wondered what it would have been like to have lived a different life, just for a little while. She realized something powerful in that moment. What we speak from a place of reflection, others often hear through a lens of guilt. A simple thought, "I wish I had done that," can feel to someone else like, "You weren't enough." And that's never what she meant, so she started keeping those tender reflections closer to her heart. Instead of saying, "I should have," she started saying, "I'm grateful for what I've learned." Instead of, "I missed out," she said, "This chapter has taught me more than I ever expected." She reframed her regrets into wisdom, not wounds. Because when you constantly revisit your regrets out loud, people may start to see you as someone who is stuck in the past, even if you're not. They may treat you more delicately, pull back emotionally, or worse, assume that your best days are behind you. But she didn't feel that way. She still had laughter, purpose, ideas, and love left to give. She was still very much alive. She was simply reflecting, as any thoughtful woman does when she's lived a full, complex life. There was one particular memory she kept tucked inside. When she was 21, a close friend had invited her to join a theater company on the East Coast. She turned it down, thinking she'd go later. Life, of course, moved on. She got married, had children, and never returned to that dream. Sometimes she'd close her eyes and picture herself under the stage lights, performing lines she never got to speak. It was beautiful, and it was hers, and it didn't need to be shared to be real. That was the deeper lesson she came to understand. Not all truths need an audience. Some are meant to be savored in silence, because regrets, especially the ones tied to love, sacrifice, and lost identity, are sacred. And when spoken out loud, they can become someone else's burden. She didn't want that. She wanted her family to carry forward the best of her, not the weight of her what-ifs. So she chose to transform her regrets into soft reminders. Reminders to enjoy the morning light, to listen to music that moves her, to say yes to small adventures, and to encourage her granddaughters to follow their dreams with boldness, without guilt. She didn't need to explain her past to inspire someone else's future, because peace in these later years doesn't come from rewriting the past. It comes from honoring it, quietly, kindly, and without apology. She still had regrets, but she held them like fragile letters never sent, read, understood, and respectfully tucked away. And in doing so, she protected the emotional space between herself and those she loved. She chose not to let her inner doubts become their emotional burdens. Instead, she offered presence, wisdom, listening ears, and open arms. Because that's what they needed most. And what she needed most was the freedom to be more than her mistakes. She had lived, loved, learned, and was still growing. Quietly, gracefully. And that was enough. Secret number 5, your plans for your assets. The fifth thing she learned to keep private was something many people believe should be shared for the sake of clarity. Her exact plans for her assets. She had spent a lifetime managing what she had with care. Every paycheck stretched, every gift given thoughtfully, every savings decision made with long-term love in mind. So when she reached her 80s, she thought the kindest thing she could do was to be fully transparent with her children about what would happen after she was gone. She thought, if they know now, there will be no confusion later. So, one by one, she sat them down. She explained how the house would be sold, how the savings would be divided, which sentimental items were going where, the ring from her mother, the photo albums, the antique mirror that had hung in the hallway since they were kids. It was meant to be fair, clear, loving. But something happened that she had not expected. Her children began to change, not dramatically, not cruelly, but noticeably. The one who rarely called began reaching out more, asking how she was feeling, and gently suggesting they prepare the house for sale early. Another child, who had moved out of state, questioned the percentages, asking, "Why does he get more? I gave up so much too." The youngest grew quiet, avoiding the topic entirely but clearly uncomfortable with it all. Her intentions had been good, but the result was tension, unspoken comparison, and an invisible pressure that now lived in every family gathering. Suddenly, she wasn't just mom or grandma. She was an estate, and that realization hurt. She started to feel like her presence was being measured by her future absence, that her value was tied not to her stories, her laughter, or her presence, but to the decisions she'd made about money and belongings. She missed the days when her family came over just to talk, to share coffee and life, not to revisit percentages and plans. That's when she understood something no one had told her. When you share your asset plans too soon, you may change how people relate to you. You may stir up old comparisons. You may trigger insecurities you never knew were there. And most of all, you may start to feel like your final chapter is already being written by someone else. So she made a decision. She redid her will, made it legal, binding, clear. She chose a trusted executor. She wrote down her wishes in full. And then, she kept it to herself. She no longer discussed who was getting what. She no longer entertained what-if conversations. When her children asked, she would simply say, "Everything is taken care of." And it was. She reclaimed the emotional space that had once been taken over by numbers and inheritance talk. She went back to being a mother, a grandmother, a woman, not a future spreadsheet. Because what she had come to realize was this: her legacy was never about the money. It was about the life she had lived, the values she had passed down, the strength, kindness, and quiet grace she showed every single day. She knew that the things people truly carry forward are not heirlooms. They are the memories of how you made them feel. So she kept her plans in place, but kept the details sacred. Because true peace, at this stage of life, is not about explaining yourself. It is about living freely, without the shadow of expectations or quiet judgment. She spent her whole life giving, her time, her effort, her care. But now, she gave herself something else, something she had earned many times over. Freedom. The freedom to spend as she pleased, to gift when she wanted, without explanation, to enjoy her golden years without watching eyes or measuring glances. She had nothing to prove. She had already given enough. And now she chose to protect not just her assets, but her dignity. At this stage in life, peace is not just a nice idea. It is a necessity. It is not about keeping secrets. It is about holding sacred what is yours, your choices, your voice, your past, and your future. She learned that the most powerful thing she could do was not to say more, but to say less, on purpose. Not to hide, but to honor. Not to distance, but to protect the closeness that matters most. Because sometimes, the things we do not say are the ones that keep love intact. And in the quiet spaces she carved out for herself, she found something she hadn't felt in years. A calm heart, a clear mind, and a life she could still call her own. She spent her whole life giving comfort, giving time, giving herself to others. And now, finally, she was learning to give something else. Space. Space for peace. Space for quiet. Space to be her own woman. Again, because not everything needs to be shared to be real. Not every truth needs to be spoken to carry weight. Some of the most powerful decisions a woman makes after 65 happen in silence, when she chooses what to hold close and what to let go. So if you've listened this far, maybe you feel it too. That gentle pull toward less noise, fewer explanations, and more peace. And if so, ask yourself, what's one truth you're choosing to keep just for yourself from now on? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. Not to debate, not to advise, just to witness. Because your experience might help another woman feel seen, respected, and not so alone. And if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe. Here, we don't chase trends. We protect wisdom. We're building a quiet, thoughtful corner of the internet, just for women like you. Thank you for spending this time with us. Take care of your heart. Take care of your peace. And never forget, you've earned every bit of it.